Welcome to worship in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte. We gather again in the space between the world as it is and the world as it could be. A space that author and educator Parker Palmer calls the tragic gap. A space he insists we must plant ourselves if we want to live a life committed to the transformation of society, if we want to have relationships that are honest and life-giving. In an interview with Alice von Stamwitz about the tragic gap, Parker says, "I call it tragic because it's a gap that will never close. No one who has stood for high values, love, truth, justice, has died being able to declare victory once and for all." In response to how the struggle for justice can be sustainable and effective, Palmer says, "Being effective is important, of course, but if the only way we judge an action is by its effectiveness, we will take on smaller and smaller tasks because they're the only kind with which we are sure we can get results." I'm not giving up on effectiveness, Palmer says, but it has to be secondary. When von Stamwitz asks, "Secondary to what?" Palmer replies, "To faithfulness. That's what it takes to stand in the tragic gap. Faithfulness first, effectiveness second. And when people are faithful to a task, they often become more effective at it as well." Faithfulness. This is what is required to stay awake in an everyday sense to the tension between the world as it is and the world as it could be. As we get ready to sing, would you turn to the people around you and say, "Good morning"?
we light this chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, knowing that each of us is needed to build what often feels impossible. A world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Here may we share the words and music that nourish our hope. Here in this company, may we find our burdens shared and our commitments strengthened.
The reading this morning is from Maya Angelou. This is the second half of the poem, On the Pulse of Morning. Perhaps you heard it the same way I did, read it for the first time to the world at President Clinton's inauguration. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. And if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men. Take it into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the shape of your most private need. Sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Do not be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. Here on the pulse of this fine day, you may have the courage to look up and out upon me, the rock, the river, the tree, your country. No less to Midas than Mendicant, no less to you now as the mastodon then. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes, into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. I want to ask you permission. In the face of this circle here, in this room, as I stand before you, I see all the life experience that there is, all of the wisdom that has walked through that door. And in acknowledging that, I tell you all I know is my experience. And so I ask permission to tell my story. May I tell you my story? Yes. Thank you. Long time ago, before most of us were born, 12,000 years. I never make assumptions about any congregation. The last glacier retreated from North America, and it left huge boulders all down the coast. In the James River, which before it was the James was the Monacan, and then the Powhatan. The boulders were left at a place that became a trading post. It became the capital of a colony. It became the capital of a state. It became the capital of a foreign country. It became my hometown, Richmond, Virginia. It was the defeated capital of the only defeated nation that I'm aware of in history that was left to tell its own story. Left to create its own history, left to create its own mythology and its own nostalgia. In that nostalgia, I was raised. My family lived right beside the Jefferson Davis Highway. To get into Richmond, we crossed the Robert E. Lee Bridge. The focal point of Richmond is the wide Monument Avenue, designed to be the Champs-Élysées of the New World. And on that Monument Avenue, the monuments were 60 feet high. Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, Jeb Stuart, Stonewall Jackson. Placed there in the 1890s through 1927, the latest. Placed there by daughters of the Confederacy. The warm, friendly, nice, wonderful people who raised me, who told me who I am, who gave me all these gifts to get through the world, saw no issue with this world because it was the world handed to them. And perhaps they told me what they were told, which was a half-truth about half of the people. When it became up to me in my life, I left. I bought a mostly orange Datsun 510 station wagon and drove to Boston, where more people agreed with me. It was too big. Too big. But at the end of my mom's life, I came back to Richmond and viewed it with totally different eyes. More educated eyes, eyes that were fixed to a body that had stored memories of playing Yankees and Rebels. It is a slow rending of the heart to understand the truth of that history, to realize that you'd been lied to. It is a journey into the past and into the future, but it's a journey that all of us must make, because the South is not a geographic area, it's a state of mind. It's everywhere. I'm going to sing you a song that I wrote from looking in the mirror and seeing my ancestors there. I talk to them, they talk back to me. I don't know don't you like it? Don't you like being heard? Don't you like the first choice? Don't you like the last word? Don't you like that you don't have to know what this is about? Be deaf, dumb, and blind, get the benefit of the doubt. To walk through this world in a velvet cocoon that everybody else can see except, of course, you, because you are everybody. Your truth is true. That's what I handed to you. Oh, no, down by the river. Oh, no, somebody's talking back from the mirror to remind me again of the skin I'm in. So here we are, by the grace of some God, knowing the mirror is flawed. What do we do now?
There's a story most often attributed to the Cherokee people that goes like this. One evening, an old man told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside of us all. It is a terrible fight between these two wolves. One is bad. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." He continued, "The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person too." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old man simply replied, "The one you feed." When I was a sophomore in high school, my paternal grandpa made the rare trip from out west to come visit us. He was a man of few words, but loving to his granddaughters all the same. All through my grandpa's visit, I, of course, had school during the day and then swim practice in the evenings, and it was difficult to get much time together. So Grandpa decided to join me for lunch one day at school. And after lunch, I walked my grandpa toward the front of the school to see him off. And as we walked, we passed a classmate of mine named Charles. Charles had acted in a lead role in the school play, and we'd had a class together. He was confident and funny and seemed to move easily from one social group to another. Charles and I had even hung out on occasion outside of class when our mutual friends happened to get together. Once, we'd sat together at a Friday night football game and had a conversation about how neither of us ever actually understood what was ever going on during a football game. which led to the exchanging of silly advice about how we could hide our ignorance of football in social situations. Like mumbling every so often, "Oh, come on, that's easily a first down." Or repeating phrases that we didn't understand with confidence. "Ah, yes, the wildcat formation." This became a running joke between us, and whenever I passed Charles in the hallway after that, we'd exchange some kind of football-related banter. That day, as I walked my grandpa out after lunch, we passed Charles, and as we did, my grandpa said loudly, "They're letting those boys in now?" Charles is Black. Charles looked up, seemingly startled by the comment, and we looked at each other for a moment in a charged, kind of uncertain silence, and then he walked away, and so did we. I never sought Charles out to talk about what my grandpa had said, and I don't recall a whole lot of interaction between us after that. The more I have considered the wolves inside myself, the more I've realized what you may have already come to. That Charles and I were not friends. Not in the way I wish now we had been. We enjoyed being acquainted, we laughed together, we shared experiences as classmates, but we didn't have conversations of consequence. We never knew each other well enough to fight and forgive, didn't share real doubts or confidences with one another. A recent post on our member Facebook page led me to an article from the Black Feminist Collective entitled, "5 Ways Nice Racism Shows Up in Progressive Communities." At one point in the article, a woman of color talks about her experiences in mostly white educational institutions, describing how isolated she felt, saying, "My issue was that the whites around me claimed to be conscious, to be well-educated on the Black experience, yet were hesitant about forging genuine connections with their equally educated and dedicated Black peers." The inequity built into our society always threatens to poison our personal relationships with one another, and so often succeeds. So long as white culture names itself as universal culture, there will too often be something strained between white human beings and human beings of color. We will too often be lonely for the realness and vulnerability of one another. Last night in this sanctuary, there was an event called Deeper Than the Skin, led by Greg Greenway and his friend and musical colleague of 30 years, Reggie Harris. Reggie shared pieces of his life story and how he has experienced what it is to be Black in America. What stood out most to me is that Greg and Reggie not only invited a conversation about race in America, they invited the wolves inside themselves to be part of the conversation as well, sharing moments of disappointment, frustration, guilt, empathy, generosity, and trust that had passed between them as they shared in the work of revealing the depths of their whiteness and the depths of their Blackness to one another over decades. What I took from this is that Greg and Reggie risk being fully human with one another again and again. Not white and Black characters who exchange pleasantries without sharing anything of consequence. not breaking faith with one another and walking away, dropping the relationship when things get awkward or difficult or honest. Their conversation helped me see anew why there was a weight in the pit of my stomach, a visceral uneasiness when my loving grandpa, without saying much, neatly separated my classmate and I into categories of worth. His white granddaughter as inherently separate from those boys, those Black people. I understand anew the truth that I never wanted to face, that I broke faith with Charles. The banter and rapport, the ease we found in each other's company in the awkward and shifting context of high school life, whatever unspoken trust was there between us that we were navigating those halls together, I broke faith with Charles. We know that conversations between white people and people of color alone cannot dismantle a rigged justice system or an education system built on inequity. And this is part of the picture of race in America. White people breaking faith with people of color. Too many white people most accustomed to fragile, inconsequential, fleeting interactions with people of color. Unwilling to face or sit at length with the so often unspoken living history of violence, terror, fear. A living history that has always characterized the relationship between a dominant white culture and people of color. What I know is that the wolf named fear that lives in human beings is strong, tenacious, and slow to give up ground. And what I know is that in each of us there is another wolf of a different name, strong and stubborn, resilient and bold, the wolf named love. Poet Alice Walker writes, "Love, if it is love, never goes away. It is embedded in us like seams of gold in the earth, waiting for light, waiting to be struck." Author James Baldwin writes of a miracle, in his words, a miracle of coherence and release. It is the miracle of love, love strong enough to guide or drive one into the great estate of spiritual maturity, he says. Baldwin, who wrote and spoke without hesitation or equivocation about the truth of race in America, about a dominant white culture that refuses to acknowledge the psychological and physical violence it inflicts on Black people. Baldwin wrote this as well. "It is necessary while in darkness to know that in oneself, waiting to be found, there is light. What the light reveals is danger, and what it demands is faith." I hear in this that there is a light within us that is dangerous to the world as it is and things as they are. There is a light within us that is dangerous to a culture built on and maintained by injustice. This light demands faith. Faith that through it all, the seams of love that run within and between us are always there, waiting to be struck. Baldwin says, "It is only if we cease to hold each other, only when we break faith with one another, that the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. If we keep faith with one another, if we are faithful to the dream of liberation, if we take the dream into the palms of our hands, mold it into the shape of our most private need, sculpt it into the image of our most public selves, then we may find, as Maya Angelou says, the grace to look up and out and into the eyes of other human beings, to say with hope, good morning. Good morning. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Good morning. The horizon leans forward, offering space to place new steps of change. Good morning.
Well, I learned as a child, there's two ways to see the world as it is and the way it could be. Some people say that's just not my problem. Some people do what must be done. Oh, they see the hole in the fabric that must be sewn. They see the wave blockaded and they roll back the stone. They see the day beyond the horizon, and they do what must be done. Now this is the chorus. Some people do what must be done. Well, they do what must be done. They see the day beyond the horizon, and they do what must be done. Sing it with me now. Some people do what must be done. Well, they do what must be done. They see the day beyond the horizon, and they do what must be done. Now, I've seen the toll taken, the tears that were shed. I've seen the journey started and the ripples spread. Still people say, well, that's just not my problem. Some people do what must be done. Oh, they see the hole in the fabric that must be sewn. They see the wave blockaded and they roll back the stone. They see the day beyond the horizon, and they do what must be done. Here we go. Some people do what must be done. Well, they do what must be done. They see the day beyond the horizon, and they do what must be done. Let's scare the neighbors. Some people do what must be done. They do what must be done. They see the day beyond the horizon, and they do what must be done. Oh, they see the day beyond the horizon, and they do what must be done. Oh, they see the day beyond the horizon, and they do what must be done.
Welcome to today's service. Whether you are in this room, in our alternative worship space in the Bernstein Room, watching this service by way of our live stream, or viewing an archived video of this service. We're honored to have guests with us here today. Our members would like to greet you following the service. So that we might do so, if you are visiting, please raise your hand and keep it up. Members, please take note of our guest sitting next to you. After the service, invite them to join you for coffee and conversation in Freeman Hall. Should it enhance your experience for future services, you can find both a large print order of service and a personal hearing assistance device on the table at the entrance to the sanctuary. If you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out a yellow card and place your completed card in the offering basket when they are passed later in the service. Members with a life event to share can do so on the reverse side of the card. You'll find them along with offering envelopes on the clipboards at the end of the row. Please begin passing them down your row now. Some returning visitors may be interested in hearing about how to become a member. If so, talk with our membership coordinator, Kelly Green, in the back. Her contact information is on the back of your order. Again, to each of you, welcome. My name is Barbara Conrad, and I've been a member here for 15 years, drawn by our dedication to social justice. As part of the Racial Justice Corps study group, I've come face to face with the history of systemic racism and the reality that as a white person, I'm a participant in racial oppression. The poem I'll now share is proof of that hard fact. I am the she in the poem. The man is Rick, whom I tracked down a few years ago, the only black student in my high school yearbook. Only a boy back then. Actually, it's the truth, she says to the man who was a boy back then, the boy who was in her high school, though she never saw him. She never saw him in school, she says, or the drugstore where she'd go for a Saturday hot dog with friends. She never saw him at the movies downtown, where he tells her now he'd wait outside on the sidewalk at the door she never saw, holding his sack of popcorn popped from home by his mother, waiting to give his dime to the ticket taker who would nod him and his brothers and sisters up 3 dark flights of stairs to a balcony she never knew was there. She tells him now she never knew it was there. She never knew his friends would lean over the rail to watch the kids below bolt back to their seats if anyone turned around or looked up. We must have seen the same movies, she says, but that really doesn't matter now, does it? What matters is this, she tells the man, and yes, actually it's the truth. She never turned around. She never looked up. So even though I'm no longer trapped in that clueless white bubble, this white skin allows me the privilege of choosing whether to never look up or to fight for a better world for others. I wrestle with that tension, to do or not, to fight or retreat, to write my legislators or read a novel, attend an affordable housing panel or a movie, take to the streets or to the woods, stand up to a racial slur, initiate a bold conversation about race. I don't think my faith judges me, but it does call me to stay in the tension. My hope is for courage to choose well.
Thank you, Barbara. If you would like to learn more about the life of this congregation, you can read through the back of your order of service or explore our website or subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, Currents. So 2 of our members, Beth Mousset and Sherry Sample, have been thinking about what it might be like to have a mural in Freeman Hall and have been dreaming of what that might look like. And they invite you to join them in conversation in Freeman Hall following this service, if that interests you. Those of you who are members of our congregation, we invite you to a reception on this Saturday, February 2nd at 3 p.m. at the Goodwill Opportunity Campus. It's an opportunity to see and hear what one organization is doing to change the trajectory of poverty in Charlotte. It's also a time for you to enjoy hors d'oeuvres and music and let us thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your generosity that allows all of the work and programming of this congregation to be possible. So we hope to see you there. We turn our thoughts now to the larger world beyond these walls. Elizabeth Tarbox writes, "I say it is our need for one another that binds us together, that brings us laughing and limping into relationships, and keeps us at it when we otherwise might despair of the fix we are in. To the people of Venezuela in their time of suffering and uncertainty, to people in our own country and people awaiting entry at our borders who were most affected by the government shutdown and who continue to sort through the frustration, anxiety, and scarcity that still remains. May we remember our need of one another that binds us to people we know and people we will never meet. We send our love beyond these walls." And we remember that within these walls, we come together in hopes of creating a community that is able to hold each of us in our times of sorrow and times of joy and all the shades of feeling in between and beyond. We hold with love and in our prayers the family and friends of a longtime member, Harriet Webster, who died this week. If there is a sorrow or a joy in your life that feels particularly meaningful this morning, later in the service when the offering baskets are being passed and the music is being played, you're welcome, visitor and member alike, to come forward and light a candle in silence. May you feel held by this community. Would you be with me in meditation and prayer, taking a few deep breaths, releasing tension as you feel it in your body, and calling on the source of your strength. This is a morning offering by John O'Donohue. I bless the night that nourished my heart to set the ghosts of longing free into the flow and figure of dream that went to harvest from the dark bread for the hunger no one sees. All that is eternal in me, welcome the wonder of this day, the field of brightness it creates, offering time for each thing to arise and illuminate. I place on the altar of dawn the quiet loyalty of breath, the tent of thought where I shelter. Wave of desire I am sure to, and all beauty drawn to the eye. May my mind come alive today to the invisible geography that invites me to new frontiers, to break the dead shell of yesterdays, to risk being disturbed and changed. May I have the courage today to live the life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more. Amen.
These words are adapted from Unitarian Universalist minister Heather Christensen. Unitarian Universalism is a grand vision of a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. That vision is embodied in our congregations, and every congregation depends on its members. Each one of us, by our commitment of time, energy, and resources, helps make that grand vision real. Let us now both give and receive our offering. Please join me in an affirmation of our faith, rising in body and or spirit. Your gifts, whatever you sow,
The words of James Baldwin: "Know that in oneself, waiting to be found, there is light. Everything in our lives depends on how we bear the light." Please remain standing as you are able, as Greg leads us in our closing music.
It's a mighty long way from over yonder. It's a mighty long way from there to here. We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. Here's how it works. It's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way from over yonder, from over yonder. It's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way from there to here. We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. Now that's too many words for you in that second half. You can just ooh through the second half. Let's try it. It's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way from over yonder, from over yonder. It's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way from there to here. We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. Every child born is a revolution, is a revolution with a song inside. Some won't hear it, oh, some hear nothing else. I'll sing night and day just to keep that song alive. Oh, it's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way from over yonder, from over yonder. It's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way from there to here. We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. Now when you got a dream, you got to stand up and shout it loud and clear. What's that I'm hearing? It's the voice of the people singing that we will make that walk from there to here. Oh, it's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way from over yonder, from over yonder. It's a mighty long way, it's a mighty long way from there to here. We're gonna take it, oh yes, one step at a time, so that we can make that walk from there to here. So that we can make that walk from there to here. So that we can make that walk from there to here.
please be seated. We're going to hold silence together for a moment.